Welcome back to the Anti-Cancer Lab. If you're new here, pull up a chair. You're in good company. This is where I read the cancer studies most people never see and tell you, plainly, what they mean for your plate. No fear, no hype. So grab a coffee and let's look at this together. Today's one surprised me, honestly, because the protein powder aisle turns out to be one of the few places where the cheap, boring choice quietly beats the hyped one. And almost nobody in those sleek advertisements is going to tell you that. Quick note before we start. I'm Dr. Becker. I'm a researcher, not your doctor, and I've never had cancer or treated a single patient. Everything here is me translating published studies for general education. None of it is medical advice, and none of it replaces your oncologist or whatever care you're already in. If you're in treatment or you've had cancer, take what's useful here and bring it to the people actually caring for you, and let them make the call. Especially with protein, because if you're in treatment, there may be reasons your team wants more or less of it. And they know your situation, and I don't. Alright, let's get into it. Let me start with an opinion before any study. If you walked into my kitchen and opened my cupboard, you would not find a tub of the most expensive, most influencer-endorsed protein powder on the shelf. You'd find something pretty plain, and honestly half the time you'd find no powder at all, just eggs and a tub of yogurt. After years of reading this literature, I've come to think that for most people over 60 who are worried about cancer, the protein powder question is mostly a packaging question. The label is doing far more talking than the protein inside it ever does. I'll tell you exactly what I'd actually put on my own plate before this video's over, and I'll warn you now, it's going to be less exciting and less expensive than you expect. That's usually how it goes with me, and I've made peace with being the boring one in the aisle. Here's why this even matters, and I want to say it carefully, because the stakes cut both ways. After about 60, most of us are quietly losing muscle every single year. The clinical word is sarcopenia, which just means age-related muscle loss. Your body slowly letting go of the very thing that keeps you upright and independent. That matters for cancer in a way people don't connect. Because if you ever do face a diagnosis and treatment, the patients who walk in, having held on to their muscle and their weight, tend to tolerate that treatment better and recover faster. So getting enough protein as a senior is genuinely protective in that broad, sensible way. That's the empowering half, and I want you to hold on to it. But the other half is that the powder you reach for to get that protein can quietly carry things you never asked for. And both of those things are true at the very same time. So this isn't me telling you to fear protein powder. It's me telling you to read the tab the way you'd read the back of any other package. Which, let's be honest, most of us have never once done. So let's start with the worst of it, because that's where the surprises live. The first thing I'd steer you away from is the powder that's basically a candy bar wearing a gym outfit. Walk down that aisle and read the ingredient line, not the bold words on the front. The front says lean, strong, recovery, fuel. The back, on a great many of them, says added sugar, sometimes 15, 20 grams a serving, plus a couple of artificial sweeteners you can't pronounce. Now here's the honest part, and I have to slow you right down because this is exactly where the internet runs off a cliff. Sugar does not magically feed a tumor in your body the way the headlines scream at you. I had that backwards myself for years, and pretending it's that simple does you a real disservice. What the actual evidence links to higher cancer risk over time isn't one spoonful of sugar on a Tuesday. It's the long, slow road of too much added sugar leading to extra body fat and chronically high insulin. And that pattern is associated, in observational studies, with higher risk of several cancers, the colon and the breast among them. So the problem with the candy bar powder isn't a one morning sugar spike. It's that you drink it every single morning for 10 years and it quietly nudges your weight and your blood sugar in the wrong direction the whole time. So, on the plate, here's exactly what to do. Flip the tab over. Find the line that says added sugars. You want that number low, ideally under 3 grams a serving. And you want the ingredient list short enough that you could read it out loud in one breath. If it reads like a chemistry set it back down. That one move, and it costs you absolutely nothing, screens out a huge share of the bad ones before you've even looked at price. Now that's one. Here's the next, and this is the one almost nobody warns seniors about. Heavy metals in plant proteins. Let me be precise here, because I will not fabricate a brand claim I can't stand behind, and I gently ask you not to repeat one either. Independent testing groups, the kind that quietly buy products right off the shelf and run them in a lab, have repeatedly found that some plant-based protein powders, the pea, the rice, the soy, the hemp blends, test higher for trace heavy metals than you'd ideally want. We're talking lead, cadmium, sometimes a bit of arsenic. And the reason is not sinister at all, it's just plain biology. Plants pull minerals up out of the soil through their roots, and if that soil carries traces of these metals, the plant carries them right along too. And then a manufacturer concentrates a whole field of that plant down into a single scoop of powder. So you can start with a perfectly honest, healthy plant and still end up with more of these trace metals in your scoop than you'd ever find in plain food. Now the honest caveat, because I won't oversell this to you. The amounts found are usually small, and the testing groups themselves will be the first to tell you the long-term cancer significance at those low levels is still genuinely debated among scientists. This is a be careful, not a panic, and I never want to hand you a fear you can't use. But cadmium and inorganic arsenic are both classed as carcinogens by the international cancer agencies. So when I can lower my exposure to a known carcinogen for free, I quietly do it. Here's what that looks like at the supermarket. If you choose a plant protein, and there are good reasons to, look for one that says third-party tested, or shows an independent testing seal, right on the tab or on the company's website. Don't assume that green, leafy, earnest-looking label means clean, because the label and the lab result are two different things. And if you want the simplest dodge of all, vary it. Don't drink the same single-source pea powder every morning for a decade straight. Rotating your source lowers your exposure to any one contaminated batch. That's a free habit and it costs you nothing but a little variety. Stay with me, because the next one genuinely surprised me when I first dug into it, and it's the most counterintuitive thing in this whole video. The branched-chain amino acids. You'll see them on the top written as BCAAs, and the headline star of that show is one called leucine, the amino acid that flips the switch on muscle building. Now, everything I told you a few minutes ago says we want to build muscle as we age, so more leucine has to be better, right? Here's the nuance the marketing skips right over. That same switch leucine flips is a growth pathway inside your cells. Researchers call it mTOR. Think of mTOR as the cell's build mode. When it's switched on, cells grow and divide. That's exactly what you want happening inside a muscle. It is not, in the abstract, what you want running full blast, all the time, everywhere in the body. Because cancer is, at its very core, growth that has stopped knowing when to quit. So in the lab, very high doses of isolated leucine can push that growth pathway hard. Let me say that more carefully, because this is precisely where people panic and do something foolish. This does not mean protein causes cancer. It does not mean a senior should eat less protein. Most seniors eat far too little, and that undereating is the bigger danger by a country mile. What it means is that chugging concentrated, isolated BCAA powders, the kind young bodybuilders slam between sets at the gym, is a completely different thing from eating normal, balanced protein. With the isolated jar, you're pulling one amino acid out of the orchestra and cranking its volume to 10 while the rest sits silent. I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. This is just another food fad, Becker. Pick a lane and stay in it. That's fair. So let me be dead plain about the takeaway, because it is actually wonderfully simple. On the plate, you do not need a separate BCAA tub. You never did. Eat your protein as whole, complete protein, from real food or from a basic complete powder, and your leucine arrives in the balanced, sensible amount that nature already packaged it in, with all its fellow amino acids around it. Skip the standalone BCAA jar entirely. That's money saved and one less worry to carry around. Let me build on that, because I haven't said anything good yet, and there genuinely is good news coming. Let's talk about collagen, because it is absolutely everywhere now, and people over 60 are buying it by the bucket and stirring it into everything. Here's my honest read of it. Collagen is fine. It might genuinely help your skin and your joints feel a little better, and the early studies on that are mildly, cautiously encouraging. But, and this is the catch the advertisements will never print, collagen is an incomplete protein. It's missing one of the essential building blocks, an amino acid called tryptophan, and it runs low on leucine, the very one we just spent 5 minutes on. So if you've been leaning on your collagen scoop as your main protein to protect your muscle as you age, I'm sorry to tell you it's the wrong tool for that particular job. It's a supplement, not a meal, and the body knows the difference even if the marketing pretends it doesn't. There's nothing dramatically anti-cancer or pro-cancer about collagen, so don't lose any sleep over it either way. It simply isn't the muscle-protecting protein the pretty packaging implies it is. So on the plate, by all means keep your collagen if your knees seem to like it, stirred into your morning coffee. That's a perfectly fine little ritual and I won't take it from you. But don't count it as your protein for the day. Count it as a small extra on the side and go get your real, complete protein somewhere else. Which brings me to the one most people skip, and it's the one I'd actually reach for myself. The surprising best pick, and I'll tell you honestly what I put on my own plate. For most seniors worried about cancer, a plain, modest scoop of basic whey protein or a clean, third-party tested pea-and-rice blend if you don't do dairy beats almost everything fancier sitting on that shelf. Here's why whey specifically is interesting and badly under-talked about. Whey is rich in the building blocks your body uses to make something called glutathione, which is your cell's own built-in antioxidant, one of the main ways your body mops up the kind of slow cellular damage that, over decades, quietly contributes to cancer risk. Now the honest hedge, because I will not oversell this to you. Most of the exciting glutathione research is older, and a good chunk of it sits in cell studies and animal studies, not large human cancer trials. So I am not for 1 second telling you whey is anti-cancer in any headline sense. And if anyone tells you that, hold on to your wallet. What I'm telling you is that it's a complete, well-studied, genuinely cheap protein that happens to feed a useful pathway, and it does the one job that actually matters most here. It protects your muscle better than nearly anything in that aisle. So at the supermarket, here's exactly what to grab. A plain whey, ideally whey isolate or whey concentrate, with a short ingredient list, low added sugar, and a third-party tested seal if you can find one on it. The unsexy, unflavored tub down on the bottom shelf is very often the cleanest and the cheapest of the lot. Pennies a serving compared to the boutique brands up at eye level. Mix 1 scoop into a glass of milk, or blend it into a banana and a handful of frozen berries. Frozen is absolutely fine and cheaper, and you've got a little over 20 grams of complete protein for a fraction of what the influencer tub costs you. Now let me put one more on the plate before we turn the corner, because the soy question comes up every single time, and seniors deserve a straight answer. Soy protein. For years, well-meaning people have whispered that soy raises breast cancer risk because it contains compounds called isoflavones that act a little like a weak form of estrogen in the body. I want to be careful and accurate here. The large human studies, including ones that followed women for years, do not show that ordinary dietary soy raises breast cancer risk. If anything, the populations that eat soy as a regular food, the way it's eaten across much of Asia, tend to show neutral or even slightly favorable numbers. So a clean soy protein, third-party tested for those same metals, is a perfectly reasonable complete plant protein. Where I'd raise an eyebrow is the same place as always. The highly concentrated, isolated isoflavone pills sold as supplements, which are a different animal from soy eaten or drunk as food. So on the plate, soy as a whole food or a clean tested powder, fine. Isolated isoflavone capsules, that's a conversation for your oncologist, not for me, and certainly not for a supplement aisle. Now before we turn to food, let me give you the number nobody in that aisle will hand you, because it's the most practical thing in this whole video. How much protein does a senior actually need? The old textbook figure was set low, calibrated for young, healthy adults, and it quietly leaves a lot of older people short. The more current thinking for healthy seniors lands higher, and a simple, doable way to picture it is this. Aim for a serving of protein at every meal. Roughly a palm-sized piece of meat or fish, or a couple of eggs, or a cup of yogurt or lentils, 3 times a day, rather than toast for 2 meals and 1 big slab of steak at dinner. The reason that spread out pattern matters is that an older body uses protein less efficiently than a young one did, so a steady amount at breakfast, lunch, and supper builds and holds more muscle than the very same total dumped into a single meal. And breakfast is where most seniors fall short. It's almost always all carbohydrate. The toast, the cereal, the muffin, and barely a gram of protein inside. So on the plate, if you only fix one meal, fix breakfast. Add the eggs or the yogurt or yes, one scoop of that plain whey. That single change does more for your muscle than any premium tab on the shelf. And it tells you how little powder you actually need once your meals are doing their job. Now, let me give you one more. And honestly, it might be the most practical protein on this whole list for someone over 60. And it's the fermented stuff. Plain Greek yogurt, kefir, cottage cheese. Here's why I single these out. They're complete proteins, they're cheap, and a single cup of plain Greek yogurt can carry 17-18 grams of protein, as much as a scoop of powder, for a fraction of the price and with none of the heavy metal worry. But there's a bonus that ties straight back to cancer, and it's the part nobody mentions in the protein aisle. Fermented dairy is full of live bacteria, the good kind, and those bacteria feed your gut microbiome. And your gut microbiome, that vast community of bugs living in your colon, is turning out to be one of the real, well-documented players in cancer risk, especially colon cancer. A healthier, more diverse gut community is associated, in a growing body of human research, with lower inflammation and better outcomes. Now let me be careful, the way I always am. That's association, and it's an active area of study, not a settled cause. And I'm not telling you yogurt cures anything. But you've got a food that hits your protein target, costs pennies, and feeds a system that genuinely matters for cancer, all in one cup. That's a rare 3-for-1. So at the supermarket, here's exactly what to grab. Plain and sweetened Greek yogurt. The bigger tub is cheaper per serving, and you sweeten it yourself with a little fruit so you control the sugar. Or plain kefir if you'd rather drink it, a cup most days. Cheaper than the powder, kinder to your gut, and it's just food. And let me be straight with you, because here comes the honesty turn, and it's the most freeing thing I'll say all day. The single best protein source for most of you isn't anywhere in the powder aisle at all. It's food. A couple of eggs in the morning, a can of salmon or sardines, bones and all, which throws in calcium for free. Plain Greek yogurt, a handful of lentils, some plain chicken. These are complete or near complete proteins. They're cheap and they come with zero added sugar, zero concentrated BCAAs, and the lowest heavy metal worry of the whole bunch, simply because you're not concentrating an entire field down into a scoop. I sat with a fellow last spring, call him George, retired, late 60s, worried sick after a close friend's diagnosis, and he proudly showed me a phone full of photos of $40 protein tubs he'd been talked into buying online, one after another. And his wife Pam was standing right there in the kitchen with a plain carton of eggs in her hand, half laughing and half exasperated at the whole pile of them. And I told George exactly what I'm about to tell you. The eggs in your wife's hand are doing more for you than 3 of those tubs combined, and they cost 1/10 of the price. Powder is a convenience for people who generally can't get enough protein from food, a poor appetite, a swallowing trouble, a busy stretch. It is not magic, and the expensive ones are flatly not better than the cheap ones. None of this is a cure. A protein powder doesn't kill cancer, and it doesn't prevent it, in your body the way a glossy label quietly implies. It shifts the odds a little, over years, by keeping you strong and keeping the junk off your plate. Anyone who promises you more than that is just trying to sell you a tub. So here's your one thing this week, and it's cheap as can be. On your very next shop, walk straight past the bold front of the protein tubs, and instead read 3 lines on the back of whatever's tempting you. 1. Added sugars. You want that number low, under 3 grams. 2. The ingredient list. You want it short and readable, no chemistry set. 3. Look for a third-party tested or independently verified seal, especially on any plant protein, the pea, the rice, the soy. If a tub fails those 3 lines, set it back on the shelf and keep walking. And if you'd rather have the even simpler version, and honestly most of you would be better off with it, just buy a carton of eggs and a tub of plain Greek yogurt instead, and call the whole thing done. That's your protein handled, for the week, for a few dollars, with none of the worry and none of the $40 tubs. You hold one lever every single day, 3 times a day, your plate, and what you scoop into it. That's not nothing, that's real power, sitting right in your own 2 hands. You don't need the expensive tub, you don't need the BCAA jar, you don't need the isolated supplements, and you genuinely don't need to be afraid of the protein aisle. You just need to flip the package over and quietly read 3 lines. Keep enough protein in you to stay strong on your feet. Keep the added sugar and the concentrated stuff out. And bring any of this to the people caring for you and let them do the rest. Food isn't a cure, but it's the one lever you hold 3 times a day. Keep it simple, keep it on your plate, and I'll see you right back here. Bring a friend who needs this, and tell me down in the comments which one you're starting with this week, the egg carton or the plain whey tub. I read every single one of these.